Hello and welcome to the Book Show on Diversity TV. I'm Ava Colaby, a writer of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. My Facebook and website are Ava Colaby Books. And we are here in rural Arkansas in the United States in a quiet farmhouse. And what I'm going to talk about today is a book called Reading Lolita in Tehran. It is by Azar Nifisi. To give you a sense of it, I will read the description off the jacket. We all have dreams, things we fantasize about doing but generally never get around to. This is the story of Azar Nifisi's dreams and the nightmare that made it come true. For 2 years before she left Iran in 1997, Nifisi gathered 7 young women at her house every Thursday morning to read and discuss forbidden works of Western literature. They were all former students whom she had taught at university. Some came from conservative and religious families. Others were progressive and secular. Several had spent time in jail. They were shy and uncomfortable at first, unaccustomed to being asked to speak their minds. But soon they began to open and to speak more freely, not only about the novels they were reading, but also about themselves and their dreams and disappointments. Their stories intertwined with those they were reading: Pride and Prejudice, Washington Square, Daisy Miller, and Lolita, as they imagined her in Tehran. Why I recommend this book is that it really humanizes the struggle that these women are going through. What they're going through in Iran is total and absolute oppression from a government that is a dictatorship. Now, throughout histories, most governments really have been a dictatorship. They did not have democracy. But this kind of democracy that so many of us take for granted, having known nothing else in our lives, was something very hard won back in the day in history. And some of us were lucky enough to just be born into that, so we have the privilege of being able to take it for granted, even if we are otherwise not particularly privileged, those of us from a working class background, for example. But it humanizes their struggle, so it isn't this kind of a theoretical feminist idea. You see what they are going through as she describes it, for the simple pleasure of reading a book. Nothing else, not doing anything wild and crazy in your life. You just want to read a book, and you have to fear getting in trouble even for doing that. I think that too often we in the West debate social issues in a very distant way. And in this book, it is very up close and personal. We may talk about the struggles of women in different parts of the world who don't have the rights that we do, but it can be in a very distant way, a sort of debating them, talking over them, talking about them. Here it is them talking to us, in that it is a female writer from Iran, but she's talking also about the experiences of these other women. So it is them talking about their struggle and what they want, rather than us talking about it. And as well, it keeps us from the thing we risk, where we are ultimately only just imposing our culture on others and saying, this is how we live in the West, why don't they live this way? Well, we're not doing that here with this book, because it's them saying what they don't like about their situation. It isn't us imposing on them. It is her speaking up for what women, and to some extent men, are going through in that country. It is a very personal way, and it is very human. It makes it less of a statistic. We're not saying this percentage of women live this way and this percentage of women live that way. It's humanized. These are real people that we get to know in this book. It reminds me of a famous quote from Stalin: "One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic." We're not looking at statistics here. These are people. This is humanized. And it really gets you into it as much as you can without having gone through it yourself by making it personalized. It's not being spoken of in a distanced way. And we are not, again, imposing our culture on them. So I'm going to read from it now, focusing on further humanizing these women to humanize the injustice of their struggle, but to also demonstrate the quality of the writer's writing, because it's not just about the social issues, it is also a very well-written book that makes it, besides the things that in it where she's talking about terrible things that happen, it is an enjoyable read for her excellent use of the language. So here we go. A couple of years ago, after we had begun our Thursday morning seminars, on the last night I was in Tehran, a few friends and students came to say goodbye and to help me pack. When we had deprived the house of all its items, when the objects had vanished and the colors had faded to 8 gray suitcases, like errant genies evaporating into their bottles, my students and I stood against the bare white wall of the dining room and took 2 photographs. I have the 2 photographs in front of me now. In the first, there are 7 women standing against the white wall. They are, according to the law of the land, dressed in black robes and headscarves, covered except for the oval of their faces and hands. In the second photograph, the same group in the same position stands against the wall, only they have taken off their coverings. Splashes of color separate one from the next. Each has become distinct through the color and style of her clothes, the color and length of her hair. Not even the 2 still wearing headscarves look the same. The one to the far right in our second photograph is the poet Mana, in a white t-shirt and jeans. She made poetry out of things most people cast aside. The photograph does not reflect the peculiar opacity of Mana's dark eyes, a testament to her withdrawn and private nature. Next to Mana is Mashid, whose long black scarf clashes with her delicate features and retreating smile. Mashid was good at many things, but she had a certain daintiness about her, and we took to her, calling her my lady. Nazreen used to say that more than defining Mashid, we had managed to add another dimension to the word lady. Mashid is very sensitive. She's like porcelain. Yassi once told me easy to crack. That's why she appears too fragile to those who don't know her too well. But woe to whoever offends her. As for me, Yassi continued good-naturedly and like good old plastic, I won't crack no matter what you do with me. Yassi was the youngest in our group. She was the one in yellow bending forward and bursting with laughter. We used to teasingly call her our comedian. Yassi was shy by nature, but certain things excited her and made her lose her inhibitions. She had a tone of voice that gently mocked and questioned, not just others, but herself as well. I am the one in brown standing next to Yassi with one arm around her shoulders. Directly behind me stands Azine, my tallest student, with her long blonde hair and a pink t-shirt. She is laughing like the rest of us. Azine's smiles never looked like smiles. They appeared more like preludes to an irresistible and nervous hilarity. She beamed in that peculiar fashion, even when she was describing her latest trouble with her husband. Always courageous and outspoken, Azine relished the shock of her actions and comments, and often clashed with Mashid and Mana. We nicknamed her the Wild One. On my other side is Mitra, who was perhaps the calmest among us. Like the pastel colors of her painting, she just seemed to recede and fade into a paler register. Her beauty was saved from predictability by a pair of miraculous dimples which she could and did use to manipulate many an unsuspecting victim into bending to her will. Sanas, who, pressured by family and society, would vacillate between her desire for independence and her need for approval, is holding on to Mitra's arm. We are all laughing. And Nima, Mana's husband, and my one true literary critic, if only he had the perseverance to finish the brilliant essays he started. to write, is our invisible partner, the photographer. There was one more, Nazreen. She's not in the photograph. She didn't make it to the end. Yet my tale would be incomplete without those who could not or did not remain with us. Their absences persist like an acute pain that seems to have no physical source. This is Tehran for me. Its absences are more real than its presences. I apologize if I mispronounced any names. I have a lack of experience with names from that part of the world. She goes on to talk about not only what they got out of their book descriptions and discussions, but what they were experiencing living in Iran as women at the time, being arrested for so much as being suspected of potentially inappropriate involvement with a male if you had 5 or 6 female friends and 1 male friend and you were out somewhere in a public place. You could go to jail just for that and have your private body parts looked at to inspect them for virginity and many other awful things that they went through. And yet they kept that spirit and that perseverance, and they were willing to take that chance and read those forbidden works of literature that many of us take for granted that we would, of course, have access to. So I highly recommend this book because of its education on what these people are going through in this part of the world, how it teaches you to be more thankful for what you do have, despite the flaws that may be present in your government, and it humanizes a social issue here, and it is just very well written. She writes beautifully in English. So that is what I have for you today. Thank you for watching the book show on Diversity TV. We appreciate our viewers all, and you have a safe and wonderful day.